Our next speaker is Hanna Alberti. Hanna has been active for many years in the Brussels Tribunal Advisory Committee. She's a well-known filmmaker and journalist, and lives in Cairo most of the year, and sometimes in Brussels. She's one of the initiators of the campaign that was started about oil money and refugee, and also one of those who took the initiative to the Le Fate Declaration, a way, an option for peace in Iraq, which is a rather important policy statement. I've had the opportunity of meeting Hanna both in Istanbul and in France a number of times, and I know that Hanna can talk about almost anything to do with Iraq. She's very knowledgeable. But she's going to try to start with the question of the refugees and the situation, and how it comes that 20% of Iraq's people feel that they have to leave their own country and get protection somewhere else. Hanna, welcome again to Stockholm.
Thank you for being here. I'm sure it will be messy, I will go in all directions, but by the end we will have more arguments, I hope. First of all, the refugees, they are the living testimony of the crime of the occupation. The others are dead. There's 1.5 million people who have been murdered, but there are some who survived and who are here, for example. And they can testify of the crime. They can explain how it was made much better than me. I hope one day they will speak Swedish fluently. Okay, then I will start. Basically, it never stopped since 1991. It's an ongoing genocide. It's 18 years of genocide. It's misleading to think they are different, that it started in 1991, then nothing happened, and then suddenly there was 2003. There is 1991, then there are sanctions, and then there is military occupation, direct occupation. But it's the same war that just takes different means, economic sanctions or militarily. The Americans run out of options or thought, which is really silly. When you are a great power, you are supposed to have different ways of pressure. So a part of the Iraqis say that they lost before they invaded. They decided to go directly and occupy, but they had started the sectarian myth long before. Iraq was never a sectarian society. There are divisions in the Iraqi society, they are political. There are different currents, nationalist, leftist, Islamist, but it was never a question that in terms of ethnicity or confession. To understand the situation in Iraq, it's very important to refuse the terminology of the occupation. So we have to understand that Kurdish, Sunni and Shia is already misleading. Are the Kurds not Sunni or Shia? Are the Sunni or Shia not Arab, Kurd or Turkmen? Never talk about the Turkmen. There's a third very big group in Iraq. So it's already misleading to think that these are constituted communities. They don't exist. I'm not saying there are no Sunni people or Shia people, but or Kurds or Arabs. I'm saying there is not something homogeneous that is a Sunni community and something homogeneous that is a Shia community. And you put at the same level something that is ethnic and something that is confessional. So in fact, you are just preventing the possibility to analyze. In 1991, they started to speak about these Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds. They tried to try to make the Iraqis think that they were governed by Sunnis, which is not the case. They were governed by the Ba'ath Party, which is not Sunni, and in fact it's a funny one. When they dismantled the state and did the de-Baathification, they found out that 58% of the Ba'ath Party members were Shia, but of course they do not advertise this too much, otherwise their whole propaganda would fall. then they sustained it in the international media throughout these 13 years of sanctions, and got to the point that even some Iraqis who were in exile started to think of themselves as Sunni or Shia or Kurds or whatever, and accepted to collaborate to the crime against their own country. Upon arrival, the genocide, in fact, is the decision to implement a plan that is very old. It's probably even after the Second World War, but written down in 1982 by some Israelis to divide every Arab nation into smaller states, so that you could, for Iraq, but Syria, Egypt, it's the same plan. It's a plan of fragmentation. They do it everywhere. They do it in Afghanistan. They want to dismantle Pakistan. They already dismantled Yugoslavia, etc. Basically, it's to have weaker and conflicting entities, create smaller states that will constantly need, militarily, politically, economically, their domination. And they did not succeed. It's a failure. It's a failure to partition. It's a failure to privatize. It's a failure to think that they could kill the will of the Iraqis to live free and sovereign over their future and their resources. It's a complete failure, and it is a genocide. What is a genocide? It's not a question of numbers, despite the fact that the numbers could tell. It's a question of intent. If you want to prove genocide, you have to prove intent. You cannot deny that bombing Iraq with depleted uranium repeatedly, when we start to know the consequences of this kind of unconventional weapons, there is no intent. You cannot deny that when you impose sanctions that you know are killing so many thousand people, and you decide to continue them, and you systematically veto the attempt by some powers to relieve the sanctions, you decide to continue them. You decide to dismantle a state without replacing it with anything that could work. Intentionally, you decide to harm the people and to put them in front of danger, in front of extreme violence, actually. They dismantled the state, and they pretend that that state is over. But that state has a continuity, because we have very patriotic forces in Iraq.